Good morning, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome back to Law and Crime Live. This is where we cover some of the most interesting live trials in the country today. Now, before we begin in our live trial of the day, I want to provide a very special welcome to all of our viewers on the Crime and Investigation channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're happy to be back. Okay, so let's talk about the live case that we're going to be in. I'm looking at a live feed of the courtroom right now. We're going to be back in day 10 of the Tex McIver case out of Atlanta. A prominent local attorney who is charged with the murder of his wife, Diane McIver. Now, the state is saying that he intentionally shot and killed his wife in the backseat of a moving car. But the defense is saying that this was all a tragic accident. This was a misfire. So as we enter into the next week, we know we saw friends, co-workers, officers, people at the hospital where Diane McIver was eventually brought. We saw them all testify, and the state will continue its case this week. Mr. McIver faces numerous charges, including murder, and also 3 counts of influencing witnesses. That's right, the state believes he tried to cover this all up. Now, one of the interesting things that we saw last week is jurors and the viewing public got to see Tex McIver in the police interrogation room. We have a short recap about his presence in that interview. Take a look.
Defendant Tex McIver, flanked by his 2 attorneys, walked into a police interrogation room and shook hands with the 2 men who were there to question him. Then he sat down and told his version of events the night his wife Diane was shot and killed. Investigators told him to explain whatever he could remember, starting with the alcohol he drank at a restaurant before the shooting.
How much was consumed? Just a glass each, 2 glasses, did you finish the bottle between the 2 of you?
Red wine gives me a headache. I had a couple sips of a glass sheet forward.
From there, he, his wife, and their friend Danny Joe got into their SUV. They got on the highway, then off when traffic backed up.
I quickly said, this is a big mistake, and we're in a place that we don't belong.
Right.
And of course, here we are in an almost new SUV and 2 women in the front seat.
Right.
He said he had been drifting in and out of sleep.
It seemed like every turn we made, the street was darker and there were more people milling about. I mean, it was the kind of thing that rose the hair on the back of your neck.
Claiming that homeless people were milling about, McIver asked for his gun, which was in the center console, wrapped in a grocery bag. His wife handed it to him. His friend was driving. He was drifting in and out.
Just time to wake up. But she came to a stop, and I was handling the gun. I realized it was in my lap,
Right.
And it went off. I immediately called out. I said, "Is everybody all right?" And Danny Joe said yes. And Diane's head was kind of slanted. She said, "I've been shot," words to that effect.
Okay.
And I immediately put my arms around her and tried to determine how bad it was.
From there, McIver described their rush to a distant hospital, which happened to be a client of his firm, and the moment he learned his wife had died.
You want to have the worst feeling in your life is to be sitting in one of those waiting rooms. 2 surgeons in scrubs and a chaplain come around the corner.
Sorry. Take your time.
The love of my life.
McIver became emotional.
And I went in to see her.
Earlier, McIver's attorney said the revolver was not fully cocked.
He didn't play with the hammer. He didn't put it back to full cock.
A cocked revolver is easier to fire. This means the gun would have been hard to fire, accidentally, but during the interview, McIver remained relaxed, something the jurors probably noticed. This is Rachel Stockman for the Law and Crime Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be live again in that courtroom. I'm keeping a careful eye on the courtroom feed. As soon as we have it, we're going to make sure to go into the courtroom. We don't want you to miss anything. But let's talk a little bit about what's happened in this case so far. Joining me on set right now is former New York City Special Victims Prosecutor Dan Schorr. Dan, great to see you and happy to be here on the program.
Great to be back with you. Good morning.
Good morning. So you saw the tape. The jurors saw the tape. What did you think of the tape? Because let's not forget what he said in that interrogation tape is kind of conflicting with the evidence that's being brought forth in trial so far.
Right. There's a lot of conflicting evidence, and there's also a lot of strange behavior by Tex McIver. So he's given different versions of what happened. It might have been an accident from hitting a bump, or it might have been caused by him falling asleep, or both. He also told Danny Jo to say that she wasn't at the scene. That's the only other person who was in the car with them.
Well, let's talk about Danny Jo, because he said that the whole reason he took the gun out, or had Diane give him the gun, was because there was this a bad community. They were going into a bad area, a bad neighborhood. But Danny Jo said, I didn't see any people around.
Right. A lot of what she says, it kind of conflicts with him, but it also never, her testimony never says that he did anything that showed an intent to kill his wife or an intent to shoot her. And of course, the prosecution has the burden here. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he acted with intent in order to get the murder charge. So Danny Jo is not a great witness for him, but doesn't seem to get the prosecution to the beyond a reasonable doubt point.
What about the idea that he waited 2 days before he met with the detectives? Certain aspects of his story didn't match up. He never mentioned anything about the Black Lives Matter movement, which is what he later told a PR person to mention. He never talked about, he said he held her hand when they went to the hospital. He wasn't holding her hand. Is these just mistakes? Is this a guy who's trying to cover up an accident, or is this a person who's trying to cover up a murder?
And those are the big questions.
That's why I'm asking you,
This
Dan.
is fascinating because right after his wife is shot and killed, he acts very strange. He tells Danny Jo Carter that she has to say that she wasn't there, even though she was in the car. That's a strange thing to tell someone to do. There was supposedly an accident, according to him, and he's saying, "Hey, pretend you weren't there." So that shows possible consciousness of guilt, and there's a lot of evidence about that. But does that show an intent to kill?
Well, that's what we're going to have to see. Dan, stand by. I want to mention to our viewers, we are going to be live today in the Claude Tex McIver case live, and we are going to cover everything. But that is not the only case that we are covering here on Law and Crime. You can go to lawandcrime.com to follow another case today. We're not going to cover it here on Crime and Investigation, but you can go to lawandcrime.com to follow it. It's a case that we were covering last week. It's out of Texas. It's about a former Houston doctor named Leon Jacob, who was on trial for hiring a hitman to take out his ex-girlfriend and his new girlfriend's ex-husband. But this hitman was actually an undercover police officer. After 4 days of testimony, including the defendant taking the stand, he was found guilty on both charges of solicitation of capital murder by a jury of his peers, and they only deliberated for about an hour. It really didn't work out so well for him. But you can go to lawandcrime.com today, because today begins the penalty phase. What will happen to him now that he was found guilty? But again, our focus today will be on the Claude Tex McIver case. You don't want to miss anything in this one, because each witness has provided crucial testimony, and we're all trying to understand a little bit more about what happened that night. So you don't want to miss anything. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to hopefully jump right into the courtroom. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, everybody. And speaking of live, we are live in the Claude Tex McIver case out of Atlanta, Georgia. We have a live feed into the courtroom. It hasn't started yet, this case about a prominent local attorney who is charged with the murder of his wife, Diane McIver, by shooting her in the from the backseat of a moving car. His defense team, and that's one of his defense attorneys right there, Bruce Harvey, with that amazing ponytail, it's his trademark, they are claiming that this was an accident, that the gun misfired. Now, the reason court hasn't started is, I want to bring our viewers up to speed, is one of the jurors is constantly late, and this juror is late again today. Now, this juror has said that this is just becoming too much of a demand on this juror's time, and the judge is going to have to resolve this issue. This juror has asked to be dismissed. So we're going to keep a live feed as soon as courtroom starts. You don't want to miss anything in this case. But I do want to preview another case that we are covering here on Law and Crime Live. It's a case that will begin Wednesday. It's about an officer-involved shooting out of Florida. It's the case of Newman Raja, and beginning Wednesday will be a Stand Your Ground hearing. We have a short preview of that case. Take a look.
A former police officer who shot and killed a stranded motorist claims it's a classic case of self-defense. He'll be making his case in a Stand Your Ground hearing this week in Palm Beach, Florida. Newman Raja is charged with manslaughter and attempted murder and the shooting death of Corey Jones, a beloved local musician. Jones was standing outside of his broken-down SUV on the phone with AT&T roadside assistance when the defendant approached him in an unmarked car in plain clothes. The defendant claimed in a 911 call the victim pointed a gun at him.
I came out, I saw him come out with a handgun, I gave him commands, I identified myself, and he turned, pointed the gun at me, started running, I shot him.
But prosecutors say the defendant's story isn't the whole truth. AT&T roadside assistants recorded the service call from Jones and showed the defendant may have lied.
And what's the name on it?
Corey Jones.
And what can I do for you tonight?
I need to get a tow. I'm broke down. Stop. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. Get your fucking hands up. Get your fucking hands up.
Oh my gosh. There's gunshots.
Raj's attorneys intend to use recent changes to Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law, which requires the prosecution to prove it wasn't self-defense before the trial. I'm Rachel Stockman for Law and Crime.
Again, we are going to cover that on Wednesday. You don't want to miss it. But our focus right now is on the Tex McIver case. We're keeping a careful eye on the courtroom. As soon as the trial begins, we're going to make sure to go to it. But let's talk a little bit more about it before we go live. Again, I'm joined this morning by former New York City Special Victims Prosecutor Dan Schorr. So much to talk about in this case. It's hard to know where to begin. I guess let's start from a basic perspective here. I've seen so far the prosecution trying to establish motive, and then they're going to go into the court, into the actual car and say, this is how the gun was fired. My issue so far is I'm not 100% convinced that this was a murder. I could very well see this as an accident. How do you see it?
It's very possible. Of course, the prosecution has to prove an intentional murder beyond a reasonable doubt to get to that count. They're trying to show the financial motive, and the defendant...
What is the financial motive?
And that's unclear, because his wife was making money that he was dependent on. Now she's no longer making that money. Apparently, there was possibly a new will that was being made. He sold a lot of her belongings at auction right after her death, which seems strange, but... There's not a clear cut here he gains this amount because she died, and he wouldn't have gained if she didn't die.
Well, here's what I don't understand. She was the breadwinner in the family, right? So she was making all the money. I think at the time of her death, she was worth $12 million. She was running a company. She owned 3 other companies. She was bringing in a steady income. She made a loan to him. Now, the idea that he was paying money on a loan that she lent him, which, by the way, is a little strange that spouses were loaning each other money by a promissory note. It's a little formal, but that's the way Diane McIver was. That's enough of a reason to kill someone, that he owed some money on a loan and that there might be another will. But what I'm not understanding is, and what they keep stressing is the point is, afterwards, he was trying to sell her belongings. He was upset that he couldn't get her Social Security checks. He tried to sell the car for money. He tried to sell her clothing for money. But then again, and he tried to get on a board at one point. If the breadwinner of the family dies, is it so abnormal that the other person has to figure out, uh-oh, what am I going to do for money?
Well, those are great points. They haven't proven a motive financially beyond a reasonable doubt, and not even to a lesser extent, I don't think. And there's also other strange behavior they've thrown in, such as the fact that he didn't pick up her remains for a long time after. And a lot of the evidence is, well, he acted strangely. He didn't act consistent with someone who had accidentally killed his wife, but that doesn't mean that they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he intentionally killed her. So there might be a motive, but it doesn't seem strong enough to win right now. Their case isn't done yet, but certainly they have to do more if they're going to show that this was an intentional murder.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. Again, we are live in the courtroom today in the Tex McIver case. As soon as we have that live feed, we're going to make sure to go to it. And again, a juror is late. That is what's keeping up the trial. It's very unfortunate, Dan. But what I want to play for our viewers right now is some of the testimony of Danny Jo Carter. She was the woman that was driving the car when Diane was shot by Tex. She was the only witness to this shooting. So let's listen in about what she had to say from the shooting. This was her testimony from last week.
Like, it's locked, and I looked at mine, and my door lock was up. So I hit the button and locked the doors, and I said, now they're locked. And I think that's the last thing that she said.
Before?
I heard a big boom, and I didn't know what it was. I thought there was an explosion somewhere. And my head turned to the right, and I looked out the window and wondered where there was an explosion, or if somebody behind us was getting ready to hit us, or something had happened behind us. I did not realize that it was gunshot right away.
How did it sound?
It was loud.
And so can you tell the jurors what happened next?
Diane turned around, like, she turned around. That's why she swung around and she says, Tex, what did you do?
Tex, what did you do?
Mm-hmm.
And did he say anything?
He said the gun discharged.
And so, what did you do when Diane McIver turned around to look?
When she turned around, I turned around and realized seconds. This was all happening in seconds. And I saw a puff of smoke and I could see his hands. And I could see the top of the gun, I could see part of the gun, his hands, and some of the bag.
Okay.
And his hand was moving like this.
Show the jurors again what you saw.
Something like this.
Really unbelievable testimony from the woman that was there. Unbelievable. Anyway, Dan, we are looking at this testimony, and we have a live feed into the courtroom. The trial hasn't started, but when you think about this testimony and the live testimony that happened, I'm really curious to see what the state will bring forward this week. Again, we believe the case is going to extend until April. The state is really continuing on with putting on their foundation for why they think this was an intentional murder. What do you expect this week?
They're going to have to show some kind of forensic evidence that shows that this was an intentional shooting, either how he was holding the gun or where the gun was, where the bullet went through either her or the seat. Because you think about all the ways that you can prove someone guilty. One is eyewitness testimony. Danny Joe Carter does not testify that he did something consistent with an intentional shooting. You could talk about admissions. He never made an admission. You could talk about possible motive and strange behavior after. We have that, but it seems like it doesn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he intended to kill her.
Well, the defense made a good point in their opening statement that this gun, this .38 caliber Smith & Wesson, could have been in single action mode or double action mode, and depending upon what mode it was, each mode requires a certain amount of pressure. So if it was in double action mode, I believe it required 12 or 15 pounds of pressure. That's a full pull of the trigger. While if it's single action, it could be a hair trigger. And we're not entirely sure what mode it was in. And then there was that whole discussion about, was he playing with the hammer of the gun or not? Isn't that really the crux of this whole story?
Absolutely, because the experts are saying, and they all seem to not dispute this, if it's a double action, he's not going to accidentally shoot it by snapping out of being asleep or hitting a bump. And those are the kinds of versions that he's using to explain an accident. So if it was in double action mode, the experts are saying that it couldn't have been accidentally fired the way he said it. But there's no one saying that it was in either of those modes, and so far there's no witness that they've offered the prosecution to say we can definitively say which mode it was in. So that's a problem for the prosecution.
Dan, we're going to take a break in a minute, but when we come back, I want to really talk about the other aspects of this case, including the words from Diane McIver. You heard what she just said, Tex, what did you do? And it should be noted at the hospital later on, she said this was an accident. It's rare that you see a victim talking and providing statements that the jury can then hear. Really, really chilling stuff, but that's what this case is about. Now, the reason, again, the trial is delayed, a juror is late. I will talk about that a little bit as well. A juror says that this is too much, that they actually want to be dismissed. So when we come back, we'll talk about the juror who wants to be dismissed and keeps holding up this case. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I could get that juror there myself. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully we'll have the live feed into the courtroom. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, everybody. We are covering a live trial here, the Claude Tex McIver case out of Atlanta. A prominent attorney who is charged with the murder of his wife, Diane McIver, by shooting her from the back seat of a moving car. His team is saying, though, that this was all a tragic accident, that they were driving, there was a bump in the road, he was sleeping, the gun went off, and his wife, unfortunately, died. Now, Mr. McIver is charged with murder, felony murder. He's also charged with aggravated assault, possession of a firearm, and 3 counts of influencing witnesses. That's right. The state believes he tried to cover all of this up. We have a live feed into the courtroom right now. We believe the court is going to begin, trial is going to begin any second. The reason it was delayed this morning is juror 61, who's continually been late throughout this whole trial, was late again today. And the judge admonished her and said, I thought that you might be more respectful of the juror's time, but you obviously weren't. There will be consequences if you are late again. Now, again, I'm here with Dan Schorr. Dan, before we jump right into the courtroom, A juror being late, what can the judge do?
It's hard to know. You could throw the juror out, but the juror wants to be thrown out, so that's not really a punishment. I don't know if you could hold the juror in contempt. I've never seen that happen, so I'm not sure what the consequences would be. But the jury, besides that juror, they want this juror out, and that juror wants out. So it's hard to see how the judge deals with it. It's not really cause to throw someone out because they're late, but it is slowing things down, and that's a problem.
And this is a big case, okay? This is a big case. There's a lot going on. The state is calling many witnesses. We believe the defense will call many witnesses. We don't want a slow trial. We want this to keep moving. It should be noted, though, at one point, Bruce Harvey, who is one of the defense attorneys for Tex McIver, he's the one with the ponytail, he got into a little back and forth with the judge. He said at one point during the proceedings last week, he said to the judge, well, your ruling doesn't make this very efficient. And he said to him, that's funny coming from you, because Bruce Harvey's style is more of a storyteller. When he questions people, it's more of a story. I don't know if you had a chance to see many of the different styles. That's also Don Samuel. That's the attorney with the beard right there. He is more of a pit bull. What did you think of the different styles from both the defense and the prosecution here?
Well, they're definitely different styles, and you saw that in the cross of Danny Joe Carter. What went on for a while, some cross-examinations just go for the key points that the attorney wants to elicit. Here, it was a slow, methodical, going through all these details, the relationship. And every attorney has a different style. You see that in court all the time. Some are very aggressive. Some are more laid back and folksy. This defense attorney, as you referenced, when he first got up, he started greeting everyone one by one throughout the courtroom. So people have different styles. They need to develop as a lawyer and see what works for them. And these are experienced attorneys, so they know what they're comfortable with.
But Dan, you got to be likable, don't you?
You have to be likable.
And Clint Rucker, who is the prosecuting attorney there with the yellow tie, he is very likable.
It's important to be likable. I remember when I was a first-year assistant DA in New York City, one of our bosses joked saying, you know, in the end, it's not the evidence, it's whichever attorney is more likable ends up winning. And that was, of course, a joke, but there is something to it that you need to be likable.
Okay, now if I'm looking at this correctly, that is Mr. Corey. He's going to be the new witness. He is the boss. He was the one that worked with Diane McIver. It was her mentor, the victim's mentor. Let's listen in live right now.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you should give the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Yes, sir. If you will, have a seat. Get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state and spell your name.
William E. Corey, W-I-L-L-I-M-E-C-O-R-E-Y.
Good morning, Mr. Corey. If you could take a minute and introduce yourself to the jury, tell them what your nickname is.
Billy.
And Mr. Corey, how are you currently employed?
I am employed.
Yes, sir.
Self-employed.
Okay. And when you say you're self-employed, what's the name of your company?
U.S. Enterprises.
And how long have you owned and operated U.S. Enterprises?
Probably, let's see, 60 years, maybe, something like that.
And you're real soft-spoken, Mr. Corey, so if you can make sure you lean in and talk into the microphone, okay? And you said 60 years?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you tell the jury how young you are?
I'm only 86.
Okay. And why don't you explain to the jury kind of what U.S. Enterprises does?
Well, now, over the years, we've had numerous businesses, just things that we thought we could make a little money out of.
Okay. And when you say numerous businesses or things you can make a little bit of money out of, what kind of industries were you involved in?
You mean from the start?
You can start.
For anybody just joining us, this is the Claude Tex McIver case out of Atlanta, an attorney who was charged with the shooting death of his wife. He's charged with her murder. Now, this is William E. Corey. He just took the stand. He was the boss. He was the one who ran the whole company where Diane McIver worked. They had a very close relationship. Diane McIver said that this was his mentor, or her mentor. Now, this man had very close relationship not only with Diane McIver, but the defendant as well. And he was present for a lot of the conversations with Tex McIver after Diane died. You want to listen very closely right now to this witness. It is a huge one in this case. We're going back live into the courtroom now.
A lot better business, it's easier business. And so our primary business billboards and real estate for many years. We would build up an inventory of billboards, sell them, build another inventory of billboards up and sell them. And we did that well, I sold the last billboard company since Diane was not there anymore. I sold it, and I sold the airport advertising company after this happened to Diane. So now we're primarily in real estate. Backing up to give you the full story, we've had vending companies. I've had a wholesale diesel, jet fuel, and gasoline businesses that Diane always ran, and transport companies, all gasoline, and then let's see, can't remember some more other companies. None of them were big companies. We just kind of going into something, trying it, working. We had video games and.
Again, that's William Corey. He was the boss. He was the one that worked with Diane McIver, the victim in this case. And he's going to probably testify to, most importantly, the conversations that he had with Tex McIver after Diane was shot. Now, again, I'm here with Dan Schorr. Dan, you might remember from last week that Jay Grover, who also worked at Corey, where this man was the boss, he was there, Mr. Corey, when Tex came by and said, Jay, can you believe that they want to charge me with a crime here? What do you expect from his testimony today?
Right, so he may corroborate that. He may give other information showing that Tex McIver is saying things that don't really seem consistent with someone who accidentally shot his wife. And this continues the theme of the prosecution that the cover-up, alleged cover-up, seems more powerful than the actual crime. And then the question is, well, what is he trying to cover up? What is he worried about if he didn't intentionally kill her? But that's not enough to prove intent to kill beyond a reasonable doubt.
Dan, let's go back into the courtroom. He's about to talk about Diane McIver, the victim.
I can't remember the exact date, but she used to tell me that she'd been there, putting up with me 43 years.
And will you tell the jury how you met Miss Diane?
I met Diane through my brother and his wife.
And when did she start? You said that she'd been putting up with you for 43 years. When did she start working for your company?
I don't remember the exact year, but it was take away from the time she got killed. She said she'd been there 43 years, and I guess she was somewhere in the early 20s, maybe. When I don't know exactly how old she was when she started that, but she was early 20s, maybe 20 or 21, something like that.
Okay. And when she started, sir, where in your business did she start?
Well, she started as an accountant. I had one accountant then. He was about ready to retire, and she started helping him.
Hold on 1 second. Could you come a little closer to the mic and have a little closer? Okay, let me see if I can help you. Let me see if we can pull the chair a little bit closer.
Well, I tell you, I got some demo hearing aids, and I was supposed to go back Wednesday evening.
I like this.
So,
Okay, you said she started as an accountant, and then after working in your accounting, I guess, part of your business, where did she go next?
Well, she just grew with the business. Diane was, I guess I got to thinking about it after this happened. She was more like a relative, I guess you'd call her I would, now thinking back, like a sister. A family, she was with me on every day except Saturdays and Sundays, most of her life.
Diane become very close.
Yeah, her office. I always had her office next door to mine. And she, I guess, is just like I got through saying, she was kind of like, I guess, now thinking back, like a sister, like a relative or something like that. Because
And was she, over the years, did she become a very integral or important part of your business?
Well, she, when she started there, I remember, I think she was kind of timid and had pigtails, and then she just, over the years, she grew with the business, and she kind of got out of that stage of being timid, and she got more and more in charge. And she, I guess, she finally promoted herself to president. I didn't have an official president.
So she promoted herself to president, and as president, did she run U.S. Enterprises?
She signed all the checks, and she handled all the business problems, the hiring, and she made most of the decisions, unless I felt like I had to get involved in it.
Okay. And
what were you doing?
He was making hiring decisions.
I was hustling real estate. I wake up trying to sell something and go to sleep.
Colorful moment there in a really sad case, Diane McIver, the case of a woman who was shot by her husband. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going straight back live into the courtroom.
Very straight.
She sat straight up. What happened?
She just sat there for a second, and I was still waiting for the light to change.
Did Mr. McIver say anything during that time?
No.
So what happened next after Diane McIver sat straight up?
I could see out of the side of my eye, the way I can see her sitting here, and she leaned forward and started doing like this, and kind of lean, like that.
Okay. And what happened next?
What she said? She said, "Tex, you shot me."
You heard her say that?
I heard her say that.
Did you say anything?
No.
Did he say anything?
No.
What happened next?
Well, for a second, less than a second, I thought it was a joke, and then I realized it wasn't, and then I knew that I had to get to the nearest emergency room.
What made you realize it wasn't a joke?
I'm not sure. I mean, I just knew that she was really, I'm not sure. I just knew it wasn't a joke.
Okay. So what happened next?
I started blinking my lights and honking my horn to see if I could get the guy that was in front of me to move. And looking for the emergency blinkers, and I asked Tex where the closest emergency room was.
Welcome back, everybody. We are going back live into the Atlanta courtroom. Again, you're watching a live feed into the Claude Tex McIver courtroom, a man who was charged with the murder of his wife, Diane. And right now on the stand is William Corey, a man that worked with the victim and was her mentor. Let's listen in.
Now, when did you meet the defendant?
I met him about the time a while before they got married.
Okay. And did you go to the wedding?
No.
Okay. And why is that?
I don't go to weddings.
Okay.
And I try not to go to funerals.
Okay. And do you know where they got married?
They got married down at, they call it, Tex call it a ranch, I call it a farm. They got a farm down at, they had a place down at Edenton.
Okay. And have you been to the farm?
Yes.
And did Diane enjoy going to the farm? Did Diane like going to the farm?
She loved it.
And from when Ms. McIver or Diane met the defendant, did she make improvements to the farm?
No.
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry. I would object depending on the foundation of his knowledge about making improvements to the farm.
I know. I'll lay the foundation.
Okay.
At the beginning of Diane and the defendant's relationship, did you see the farm before?
No, I didn't see it back before she got a hold of it.
Okay. And when you said she got a hold of it, do you know or remember about the time she got a hold of it?
I don't remember the year.
Okay. Was it before they got married or after?
I don't remember that. I couldn't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. And when you had been to the farm, can you describe to the jury, I guess, what it looked like? Was there multiple houses?
It was a main house, and it had a sort of it had a barn. It was not really. They called it a barn, but it was like a real.
As we watch William Corey testify in the Claude Tex McIver case, he was talking a little bit about what Diane McIver was like as a businesswoman, that she was very shrewd, and that keeps being a common theme. Again, I'm here with former New York City Special Victims Prosecutor Dan Schorr. That idea that she was shrewd, she might have been difficult at times, she had a sharp tongue, how is that being played into the prosecution's case?
Right, and that many people have said that, some in testimony, some just in out-of-court statements. That might be part of a motive to Tex McIver, that maybe the relationship wasn't good. Maybe he couldn't continue the marriage the way he wanted to because he owed her money and she was shrewd with him. They might be building that as part of the motive that he wanted out of that marriage, and he decided to do it by intentionally killing her.
And they even pointed to the fact that in the night in question, when they were having dinner, she was teasing him about his weight. Is that enough of a motive for murder? We'll have to wait and see. Let's listen in live to the courtroom.
Condo down at Reynolds Plantation for years before they met. She belonged to that golf club down there. And then I think she must have sold it about when she got involved with the ranch over there with Tex.
Did she own any properties here in Atlanta?
She had bought 2 condos and merged them together over in Buckhead.
I'm showing you on the screen in front of you, State's Exhibit 348. Is that where Miss Diane owned her 2 condos?
Yes.
And have you been to those condos?
Yes.
And was it 2 separate condos, or was it one big condo?
Well, there was one big one when she got through with it.
Okay, when she got through with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you? Did you get to see the condo during the renovations?
No.
Okay. Did you get to see the condo, the 2 condos that became one after the renovations?
Yeah.
Can you tell the jury about the renovations or what Miss Diane did to make the condo so beautiful?
Well, she made it like she wanted it. It was like I guess you'd call it a Hollywood condo when she finished up with it. She was very particular about everything, and she was a neat freak. She couldn't stand anything being a dirty glass in the sink or anything like that.
Now, you said at the Corey companies, your offices were next to each other?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did she decorate that office?
She decorated everything in sight.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 137 right in front of you. Is this Miss Diane's office?
Yes.
At your company? Yes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And did she have her own private bathroom?
Yes, she had a big bathroom there, and she had some file cabinets in it, a little refrigerator, and I guess a little couch or something in it too, I think.
Okay. And during your business, I guess deals over the years, did Fisher and Phillips represent your business at some point?
Fisher and Phillips represented us probably 20 years before she met Tex.
Okay. And after she met Tex, did the defendant become involved with some of the litigation that your company was involved in?
Yes.
Okay. And during that litigation, did Miss Diane and the defendant work together at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And did the fact that they were married, did that affect the way that she did business?
Definitely not.
Okay. Tell me why you say definitely not.
Well, I've seen them get in some pretty heated arguments about the invoices, and she had refused to pay some of the invoices, and she had asked Tex to get them adjusted.
Okay. And was that a common occurrence when she was doing business with the defendant?
She did. Let me see. I guess, yeah, it was common, but I don't think it didn't happen all that often as I remember.
Okay. And I'll ask a better question. Was that a common occurrence when she was doing business in general?
Interesting right there. Interesting point. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go live into the courtroom. We'll stay tuned. You don't want to miss anything. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, everybody. We're live in the Claude Tex McIver case, a man who is on trial for the murder of his wife, Diane McIver. Now, on the stand is William Corey, a man that worked with the defendant very closely. In fact, some people have said that he was her mentor. What he's testifying to right now is the relationship between the victim and her godson, Austin Schorr. Now, the reason Austin is a key figure in this case is because of the presence of a possible second will. Diane McIver might have left this property, this ranch, to Austin as opposed to the defendant. And in a case where the state is trying to prove motive, trying to show that he had a financial motive to kill his wife, that's where this testimony becomes critical. Let's listen in.
You have a shooting range or mound at the ranch?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever have an opportunity to shoot guns at the ranch?
Shoot a gun?
Yes.
I didn't care anything about shooting a gun at that ranch.
Okay. Are you a big gun person?
Objection to relevance.
Are you a big gun person?
No.
Okay. Now, how often do you think that you would go to the ranch, Mr. Corey?
I'd go there. Diane would invite Janelle and I down there maybe once a year on dinner one night, and then we'd always go down there to Austin's big birthday bash that she'd have for him, her and Tex. And they'd have a regular schedule going down there.
Okay, and you said Janelle and I. Who is Janelle?
My wife.
Okay, and how long have you been married to your wife?
Well, since 1954, whatever, 63 or 64 years, whatever that is.
So a good amount of time. A good amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm going to direct your attention to the morning of September 26th of 2016. Did the defendant call you?
He left a message on my voicemail about around 6 o'clock in the morning.
And do you remember what that voicemail said?
Said he called him.
Okay. And after listening to the voicemail, did you call the defendant?
When I went in my dressing room about 7, whatever time I went in there, I did return his call.
And when you returned his call, what did the defendant tell you?
told me that Diane had been killed in a firearms accident. Well, I remember that it kind of, I couldn't believe it. It kind of it shocked me. When he said Diane had been killed in a firearms accident.
And one last question. At the memorial, did you have an opportunity, the Memorial Quarry Services, did you have an opportunity to speak to the defendant?
I spoke to him.
Okay, and
that's all I did. I just spoke to him.
Okay.
But there were a lot of people that I was trying to speak to. It was very nice. I mean, Jay put a first class celebration of life for her, because she'd have done the same thing for me.
Okay. And do you remember the defendant? What did he say to you? Or was it just
I just spoke to him.
Okay.
I didn't invite anybody over there except the people that was on good terms with Diane. And I'll let that be known.
And you said that she would have done the same thing for you. Is that because she loved you?
Say that again?
You said she would have done the same thing for you. Is that because she loved you?
I announced it. I said, you don't need to have one of these things for me, because I'm doing the same thing for her that she would have done for me.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Corey. I don't have any further questions, okay? That water's for you if you want to take a sip.
Ms. Carter-Palmer, any questions for Mr. Corey? Okay.
Really emotional testimony by William Corey. Really sad to see. Before he gets cross-examined, though, I want to dissect a little bit about what he said. Again, I'm here with Dan Schorr. I think there were some interesting tidbits here. The idea that Tex didn't really explain how Diane got shot, said it was a firearms accident. He thought that was surprising. He told Tex not to sell her jewelry. Tex did. Then this celebration of life ceremony. And you just heard him say it was really emotional testimony. But what did you make of him?
Well, he also said that Austin, the godson, that if he needed toothpaste while Tex was in the hospital in intensive care, she would have focused on the toothpaste. So all this goes to paint a picture that the relationship was not great, both because of how they interacted before she died and how Tex acted after she died. Does that mean he intended to kill her?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Dan, stand by. We have the cross-examination underway. Let's listen in live.
You didn't want to share with me, you didn't really want to talk to me about this case, right?
I didn't have anything. I told you to ask these people down here what they asked me. I didn't know what they. I didn't know what they. I didn't have a reason to be talking to you.
Right. Because I told you that I represented Mr. McIver, right?
I guess you did. I didn't pay much attention to you, really.
Mr. Corey, did I understand your answer about how many times you went down to the ranch?
I don't know how many times I went down. I didn't count the times I went down.
I heard you say that you would go. You'd be invited down there maybe once a year, and then you would also go down for Austin's birthday party.
That's what I said.
So about 2 times a year you would go.
I went down there more than that. Diane had bought. She bought a little building down there that we rented out. It had a billboard on it. She bought that, and then she had bought a bunch. She had assembled a good many billboards down there around her area, because that was her. We was in the billboard business, and we probably had, I don't know, 15, 20 billboards down there. I didn't ever see most of the billboards.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you about Diane's work with you in the billboard business and your other businesses. Okay. All right. When Diane died in 2016, do you know what her salary was at that time?
I don't know exactly what her salary was. She kind of did her own thing with the salary, and I trusted her with everything. I trusted her with it. She wrote the check. She signed a deed. I don't remember what the salary was, but whatever it was okay.
Okay. You just don't know what her salary was?
No, I don't know what her salary. I couldn't tell you exactly what her salary was. I never wrote her a check.
Right.
She wrote her own check.
Okay, so if we wanted to know what she was making from U.S. Enterprises, we need to go find a W-2 or a check or something like that.
You need to get her bookkeeper or somebody if you want to find out that. I don't know about her. I don't think very many people would have known anything about her business, but her and our accountants or something.
And would anybody else at U.S. Enterprises know how much her salary was?
I don't think they would. I doubt it. If they would. I doubt if they'd know what.
Okay.
What she meant.
Okay. But she also had a part of an interest in a business called DRS, correct?
She did.
Okay. And U.S. Enterprises was also in business with DRS.
No, we weren't in business with them. I didn't have any interest in DRS. Her and Richard Harrell owned DRS. I had no interest in it. I never saw a bank statement. I didn't know anything about the business.
Again, you're watching William Corey testify in the Claude Tex McIver case, a case where a prominent attorney is charged with the shooting death of his wife, Diane McIver. This has been some really emotional testimony, but an important testimony nonetheless. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go live into the courtroom. Stay tuned.
A memorial service?
I guess it's whatever you want to call it.
Okay. It was an event at the Corey Enterprises or the Corey building.
Yes.
Right? Where people came and shared their memories of Diane, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And it was sort of a tribute to her, correct?
It was.
Okay. And you said that Tex was there, right?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And there were some other events after, there were some other memorial services after the one at Corey Enterprises.
I understand Tex had something over at the condo.
Did you go to that?
No.
Okay. And what about a memorial service in Texas? Did you know about that one?
No.
Okay.
Wait a minute now. Tex, I think he, in a conversation, he said he wanted to know if I would fly some people, take our plane and fly some people out to Texas to a memorial of some kind of something he was having out there, but I didn't pay any attention to it. I just wasn't interested in doing that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he named off a few people that I could take out there, and I said I just didn't want to do that.
Okay.
You bet.
All right, everybody. So as we wait to see what happens with this witness, he might be excused. I want to bring in Dan Schorr again. Dan, we're listening to this. The idea that Austin Schwall, okay, Diane's godson, that plays a key factor in the financial motive. Can you explain that to our viewers?
Right, because apparently Diane wanted to help Austin, and maybe some of the money that she had would have gone to Austin and not to Tex. Maybe there was a new will being created to give more money to Austin. So
and I think he might have gotten the property in this new will, the ranch, and even at one point, Mr. Corey said the ranch kind of belonged to Austin.
He had a room there. He went there a lot. So this is all a possible motive that Tex would have to kill his wife.
But I'm not clear that Tex didn't know about this, that he didn't know about this will and that the property was going to be going to Austin. We've heard earlier witnesses say that Tex knew about this. So how pivotal is this testimony? Was there another part of Mr. Corey's testimony that you found more compelling?
I think that and the fact that he seemed to suggest they didn't have the greatest of relationships, that is a small piece of information that with other information can be pieced together to prove this case, but in and of itself, it doesn't prove a motive to kill. In fact, if I'm the defense, I'm going to say he might have helped the defense because then when you see Tex struggling to sell the jewelry right after she died, you could say that's because he was in financial hardship after she died.
So you don't make more of him trying to sell the jewelry, the furs, all of that, and the days after she was shot and killed. You don't make too much of that.
Well, if I'm the prosecution, I'm saying that's inconsistent with someone who accidentally had their spouse killed, that he's trying to profit off it, that's part of the motive. If I'm the defense, I'm going to say, look, he was in financial hardship after she died, and he needed to sell off her property, and he would have been better off if she was alive. So I feel like that piece of information can cut both ways. It certainly doesn't make Tex look like a good person, because when your spouse dies by accident, you're not supposed to be in a rush to sell their property.
But I think the defense made a great point in their opening statement. Where is the rule book about how someone should react when their spouse dies? We have a live feed back in the courtroom. Let's listen in.
No. Okay. Do you have any follow-up, Mr. Abate?
Why not?
Objection. Object to that question.
Well, the answer is it depends whether I'll sustain an objection. Why don't we come back over to you, please? Sorry, Mr. Corey, hold on.
So one of the interesting aspects of this case is that the jury is allowed to ask questions of each witness. That's what's going on right now. There was an objection made about the jury question. As soon as we have that live feed, we'll make sure to go back into the courtroom. Dan Schorr and I were talking a little bit more about this, about his testimony, and the idea that, okay, so he sold the jewelry. What is the right playbook for how someone should react after their spouse is killed? Now, his behavior doesn't look great, but is that enough to convict somebody?
Right. It doesn't make him look good that he's focused on selling her property, but I've seen people who have had a spouse die who then tried to sell off property or move property or throw out property or donate property right after, and sometimes it seems unseemly that it's so quick, but that doesn't mean that they intentionally killed the other person. So the prosecution will certainly use this to argue that there was an intent to kill and that he acted consistent with an intentional murder, but it doesn't prove it. It doesn't mean that it has to have happened that way.
Dan, we have so much more to go in this case before we can say, oh, definitively this looks like it might be murder or not. But if for some reason the prosecution doesn't do a strong enough job of showing this is murder, you know what? I'll stand by. We'll talk about that in a second because we do have a live feed. Let's listen in now to Mr. Corey.
And you said no, and then Mr. Abate said, well, why didn't you? And we paused. I'm going to ask you to answer that now, if you would, please.
I figured if he wanted to tell me what happened to her, hell, I knew what happened to her. He shot her in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. Anything else, Ms. Clark Palmer?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
1 minute.
Well, it's as clear as day. He said, I knew what happened to her. She was shot in the back by Tex. Again, Dan, as we wait to hear the next jury question or when he's questioned about that jury question, I had a question for you. This could look like an accident, but he could still be charged with influencing witnesses, right? Some people look at this and seeing a cover-up of a murder. Some people say this covering up of an accident. Dan, I'm sorry. Let's stand by. We have the live feed. Let's listen in now.
Yeah, let me make sure that you say that one more time.
You knew that Tex shot Diane in the back because Danny Joe told you that.
Yes.
And Danny Joe told you it was an accident, correct?
She didn't tell me it was an accident.
She didn't say that to you?
No, she didn't.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Corey, I appreciate the time you've taken out of your day. You are free to go. Thank you for coming down here.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
All right, William, Billy Corey is being excused. The next witness will come on. Dan, let me go back to you about the question that I had. Some people look at this as a cover-up of an accident. Some people see this as a cover-up of a murder. It could really go both ways, but at the end of the day, he could be found maybe not guilty for murder, but found guilty for the influencing witnesses charge, right?
Right, and there's 3 counts of that. One is with Danny Joe telling her at the hospital right after his wife has been shot, saying, hey, why don't you say you weren't here, that you just came over to help, that you weren't in the car. There's 2 other counts of influencing other witnesses, and that's the strongest part of the prosecution case. It actually looks like he will be convicted on at least one of those counts. And does that prove intentional murder? Because the prosecution is going to argue, well, what is he covering up if there's nothing to cover up?
Dan, let's listen in live. We have a new witness on the stand. We are live in the Claude Tex McIver case.
I'll get you uncomfortable for a minute, just get you in, and we'll get back to it.
Okay.
All right, everybody, as we wait for that next witness to get set up, I want to say so long to our guest for this morning, Dan Schorr. Dan, any final thoughts as we go into this next day of testimony?
It's going to be fascinating to watch this week. I'll definitely be watching. I don't think the prosecution has proven their case yet beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's not over yet. They still have other witnesses. They're going to have to argue that all this evidence together proves intentional murder, and they still have some work to do, and it's going to be interesting to see what these additional witnesses show.
Yeah, we know that Tex shot Diane, But was it intentional? That becomes the question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go live into the courtroom.
Court's record, please state and spell your name.
My name is Ann Schwall, A-N-N-E-S-C-H-W-A-L-L.
And good morning. On the record, Your Honor, good morning, counsel, ladies and gentlemen. Could you introduce yourself to the jurors? It's okay if you look at them. Tell them your name, and I apologize for asking this, but how old you are.
Okay.
It'll get better from that.
My name is Ann Schwall. I'm 49 years old.
Okay. And can you share with the jurors a little bit about your educational background?
Sure. I went to Vanderbilt for college. I have a master's degree in early childhood from Emory, as well as a master's degree from Georgia State for leadership. I was an assistant principal in elementary school.
Okay. And can you share with the jurors, how are you currently employed?
I am in real estate. I am Vice President of Developer Services, which is the new construction division, Atlanta Fine Homes, Sotheby's International Realty, heading up new construction projects in Atlanta.
Okay. And how long have you generally been associated in the real estate industry?
I got started in real estate when I was 2004. When I was the assistant principal, I was pregnant with my first son, Craig, and I decided to make a transition at that time out of being an assistant principal and into the real estate world. So I thought a little bit more flexibility.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, are you currently married?
I am.
Okay. And can you share with the jurors, do you have any children?
I do. I have two.
And what are their names?
Craig Schwall and Austin Schwall.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors who is Craig Schwall Sr.?
So Craig Schwall Sr. is my ex-husband. Yes.
Okay. And how is he employed?
He is employed. He's a judge. He's a Superior Court judge in this courtroom, or this
in this building. Yeah. Now, can you share with the jurors what are the ages of your two children?
So my oldest, Craig, is 13, and Austin is 11.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors what year was Austin born in?
He was born in 2006.
2006. Now, can you tell the jurors, at some point in time, did you become acquainted with Langda Diane McIver?
Yes.
And can you share with the jurors when that would have occurred, and share with them how did you become acquainted with her?
Okay. I met Tex and Diane when shortly after I got married. They were just good social friends of ours. They were very supportive of Big Craig. And
Big Craig being your former husband?
Yes.
Okay.
Big Craig and Little Craig. So we call him Big Craig. So it was just very supportive of his career and of us.
Okay. And if you could give the jurors some context, about what year would that have been?
Around 2001.
About 2001. So can you tell the jurors...
Okay, so that's Ann Schwall. She is the mother of Austin Schwall, Diane McIver's godson, a man, oh, I should say a young man, who really plays a pivotal role in this case because of the financial aspect, the financial motive. We're going to talk about that more. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute.